This was a long time in the making, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be excited to see these our two minds kind of bump against each other. But for people that may be newer to the entire situation, you want to start with kind of just introducing the patent and kind of how we got up to this point.
Well, it's a patent that was the invention was created in 2013. Okay, and the invention is what I call peer-to-peer capital markets. To take the traditional hub and spoke capital markets where you have powerful players in the middle, let's say central bank, and then you have exchanges going around in concentric circles, money center banks, uh, national banks, regional banks, etc., and then consumers and users and businesses on the outside. And that hub and spoke or fists and concentric circles are now moved into a peer-to-peer paradigm where think of a million mirrored dots all over the place, and each dot is connected to each other dot randomly and directly. So instead of you, say, buying a stock, having to go through a broker, and that broker goes through a clearing bank, and that clearing bank goes through an exchange, and then coming right back for the purchase of the stock. So you put money in, and it goes that way through all those players, and then the exchange transfers the dollars for the stock, which goes through the clearinghouse, which goes through the broker, which comes back to you. You now deal directly. So Wade can deal directly with Richard versus dealing through Morgan Stanley, DTCC, and NASDAQ. And every time you go through one of those concentric circles, they take their, big privacy, counterparty credit risk removed, and direct transactions, speed, auditability, transparency, a million ways, not quite a million, but a dozen ways to show where the peer-to-peer capital markets is a superior model. And it's enabled by technology. So we came up with that in 2013. We patented it in 2014, or we applied for patent protection. It's an application. So the difference between an application and a patent is same as the difference between an application to law school and a law degree. Okay, so your application is of minimal value, but the law degree is significant. Okay, and from 2014 till December of 2021, we prosecuted the patent, which is legal parlance for going back and forth with the patent office, trying to get them to approve the claims in our viewpoint. It was a very, very long fight. 7 years is an extremely long time to prosecute a patent. I've seen patents in this space approved in 3 months. The average time will probably be 2 years. 2 or 3 years. The blockchain patents have a 90% rejection rate. So 9 out of 10 blockchain patents that have been applied for have been rejected in the USPTO. So it goes to show you how arduous a task with a 90% rejection rate over a 7 year period it is to get these type of patents. But when we get this patent, and we consider this patent foundational technology, which means it's a patent that controls the bottom layer of the technology of which everything on the industry would be built on top. It's a very, very powerful asset. It is my belief and that of my engineers, developers, and analysts and lawyers that this patent covers Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, NFTs, or the transfer of NFTs, um, code storage using partially signed transfers, etc.
I can't wait to ask you about that, but yeah, continue.
Okay. So that's the patent in a nutshell. My background, strong finance and investment. My expertise is valuation and macro risk, or valuation and risk, or risk adjusted reward. Uh, I'm a student of global macroeconomics. I'm not a big believer in economics as a science, it's statistical science. It's much more art and guesswork than anything else, despite the math. But I do pay attention to what goes around in the world. Even though I live in New York on the East Coast of the United States, um, what happens in South Vietnam has much more of an impact in Brooklyn than many would be led to believe. Okay, so we look at everything. We take as many data points as we think are credible into consideration, and we make a decision on what is happening in the present, value risks, rewards, and act accordingly. I like to make money, and I don't like to lose money.
Hey, I agree with that. I did write down the abstract from the patent, and I kind of wanted to just read over it really quick and then go into a question that I got through reading through a lot of the information you gave me. The Coinbase analysis was beautiful work, by the way. But the abstract says device systems and methods enabling parties with little trust or no trust in each other to enter into and enforce value transfer agreements conditioned on input from or participation of a third party over arbitrary distances without special technical knowledge of the underlying transfer mechanisms. Optionally, affording participation of third party mediators, substitution of transferors and transferees, term substitution, revision or reformation, etc. Such value transfers can occur reliably without involving costly third party intermediaries who traditionally may otherwise be required and without traditional exposure to counterparty risks. Now, I hear a lot payments come into this discussion, how this patent affects the payment industry. But I'm curious if it would apply to IoT applications, supply chains, or entertainment platforms. Several of those tokens which sit on Ethereum, and I don't dispute that Ethereum definitely infringes. But when it comes to value transfer, where would data transfer fall into all of this?
Well, the definition of value is something that has value. Um, in electronic form, all transfer is electronic data. I challenge anybody to name or identify the transfer of anything to an electronic network that is not data. It's impossible. Okay, data is simply information, and information or value is comprised of information. Value can be uh, the arrival of a shipment. Okay, it could be the shipment of itself. It could be proof of the arrival of the shipment. It could be a signature. It could be currency in myriad forms. It can be a commodity, an asset, etc. So in this new or not so new digital age, data is value and value is data. I say not so new because we've been using digital currencies since the 60s at the very, very least. Um, ATMs, bank accounts, etc. When those bank accounts use electronic methods for accounting.
So would that same thing would that apply to the cold wallet situation? Because I was very curious about that. I've really been digging more so into cold wallet storage recently, and then I see that you come out and you guys, it was the video about cold storage being an oxymoron, and it really made me want to ask, what cold storage solutions do you think, or have you guys found any yet that fall under the patent at all?
Yes. Okay. The Well, first the article, cold storage is cold storage security. It's an oxymoron because in the crypto industry, a lot of people think, trying to think of a politically correct way to say this without pissing everybody off. But let me take a different track. Let's just piss everybody off and then show where you shouldn't be pissed off. Okay. Um, Everybody wants crypto to be some type of investment, right? Or a security, but they don't want to call it a security because they don't want the SEC, et cetera, coming down. But crypto is not an investment. It's not a security. Crypto is technology, period. Okay, it's IP, intellectual property. Now, on the converse side, um, the early adopters of crypto were developers, cypherpunks, tech heads, etc. They looked at things from a technological perspective and often failed to take in everything else. That failure is minimum when it's all about technology. But as you start adding reality and particularly large amounts of capital, and you start to build businesses, it's all about the business. Okay. So you have a company, it's a startup, let's say a crypto startup. Okay. It starts to make a lot of money, but its product is very, very volatile. Hence, its revenues and its margins are very, very volatile. So it's not a low risk company. Let's say it's rated a junk rating. Okay. Not necessarily bad, but definitely not safe. It's the opposite of, say, hard to come up with a safe company these days, all state insurance. Okay. But we're saying now it's not a bad company, it's just a very risky company. Okay. And this company says we're the safest company in the country. Okay. We are public, we have access to capital, we are covered by analysts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they take you take your assets, which you have custody of. There's no counterparty risk because you're the only party that's involved. You have a private key. You have decentralized assets. You take these assets, you send them to that risky company. So you relinquish control and ownership of your assets. They take it. They give you basically an electronic IOU saying, will we return these on demand? Okay, unless the government asks us not to, or we get into a lawsuit or assets are frozen, which is not good because now you've taken on their counterparty and credit risk where there was none before. And then for safekeeping, we're going to put it in cold storage. And 98, 99% of our assets are in cold storage. Cold storage is much harder to hack. Because it's harder to hack, these assets are safe. The problem is, a lot of people think they just believe that. They say this is true. It's in cold storage, it's harder to hack, we're safe. Technologically, it's safer, but you still took on the risk. You voluntarily take on the counterparty risk of a very risky company whose entire business model is predicated on some of the riskiest assets in the world in terms of volatility. You take on the credit risk of that same company and that same risky business model. Okay. But you assume that everything is good because technologically they've locked assets down. Okay. And these are assets which you no longer own. So that's why I came up with the mantra of cold storage security is an oxymoron because it's not secure if you're relying on a junk rated financial institution. Okay. The last institution that you want to be junk rated is a financial institution. Turn this around. Let's say you have a bank, you keep your life savings in that bank, okay, and all your short-term and long-term investments. That bank has a junk rating, which means there's, let's say, 4 or 5% chance of it going out of business. Okay, that means out of every 100 accounts, 5 accounts could be lost. Out of every 100 scenarios, 5 of those scenarios result and you're not getting your money back. Oversimplifying it. That is not a safe investment. Hence, the cold storage is not safe, regardless of what the technological benefits would be. So you have to look at when you're running a business and not just a technology concern, you have to realize that you have business risk, you have credit risk, you have counterparty risk, you have legal risk, and you have the technology risk and the risk of hacking, et cetera. Taking all these variables in, I can't think of a single safe cold storage option. There are safer cold storage options that are third party custodial cold storage because they may have a large amount of capital, et cetera. But there's so many things that weren't taken into consideration. Almost nobody's taken IP risk and patent infringement risk into consideration. And if 100% of your business is, say, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, trading, staking, et cetera, then 100% of your revenues are exposed to a patent that covers those assets. So do you see how there's rampant risk in the industry that wasn't considered. And what makes this even more interesting, if this was any other industry, this would have never happened. If you were a private equity investor or venture capitalist and a chip manufacturer came up as a startup, right? Say we came up with this fancy um, chip, and this chip is faster than any other integrated circuit. Our memory stores has much more density, much more speed, and this is basically the best thing since sliced bread. Would you just run up and then throw them $50 million, or would you say, well, do you have a patent? Do you own the technology that this is based upon? Show me how it works. That would happen for a chip manufacturer, a fab, a semiconductor um, fabricator, a biopharmaceutical company, anybody except for crypto. And crypto is literally 100% IP.
Hmm.
Like take the
I
IP out of
agree. I can definitely agree with that because one of the earliest questions I had when I got into crypto, and this was summer of 2019, is when I first got in. And when I started making content and I was using different logos for different projects, the question landed on me. It was like, is this, can I legally use these logos? Because, with the YouTube thing, there's merch involved and you come up with ideas. And in that process is when I had started to consider the licensing, copyrights, and trademarks of these projects because a lot of them, they have come up with these intricate logos and designs, but there's really no system in place to prevent another project from copying the logo or the name or the platform or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I guess a question to stem from that would be, do you see the mission that you're on as kind of a point in the timeline of crypto that's going to change the way things are done going forward?
Well, it will, but it's not necessarily coming from me. Things change when you have professional businessmen and operators come in. For instance, NFTs, and this is a very interesting topic. Our patent covers the transfer of an NFT. Just keep that in the back of your mind. NFTs are very popular, popular for the wrong reason. Um, JPEGs and pictures are being pushed, but NFTs are much bigger and much more capable than that. But it's really irrelevant for right now. Okay, so JPEGs of popular handbags and sneakers are being pushed. The logos are being copied, sold, and the creators of these NFTs, some of which are putting very little effort into it, uh, getting a significant windfall in the beginning. So much of a windfall that the owners of the copyrights and the trademarks are coming in and they're suing. Nike is suing StockX, if I'm not mistaken. Um, the maker of the Birkin bag.
Yeah,
Can't
that was
remember.
Hermes. The
Hermes,
Metaverse.
right? Hermes,
Yeah, that was a very
Hermes.
interesting read there, the
Yeah.
Metaverse. Yeah.
So they're suing some guy with a name, Rothschild, a guy with a Rothschild name,
Yeah,
and
makes
basically,
sense.
yeah. So basically, they're saying you can't use our intellectual property, our trademarks and brand names without permission.
Mm.
Perfectly understood. Okay. I went to NYC, NFT NYC, and there was a track just for lawyers, dozens of lawyers back to back to back to back, and they're all giving the same advice. And in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, okay, so do not take what I say as legal advice, but in my opinion, they were giving awful advice. They were saying there are three major tranches of IP. You have copyright, you have trademark, you have patents. They say you don't have to worry about patents in the NFT because patents are for inventions and they don't apply here. You do have to worry about copyrights, which is basically um, written words, okay, and or um, written words or spoken words or singing. You have to worry about trademarks, which are brands, logos, phrases, etc. And then I query, I'm like, why don't you have to worry about patents? They say because patents cover inventions and there's no invention here. That is a no-no, number one. And it also shows, with all due respect, I'm not going to aim at any particular lawyer, so I'm not going to name anybody, ignorance, because it's a technology that wasn't used. And to my knowledge didn't exist significantly before. 10 years ago or 12 years ago, it didn't exist. So if it didn't exist 12 years ago and exists now, somebody invented it. Okay. Somebody invented it. There's a good chance somebody patented it. Just because you're not aware of it from a technical perspective, you should not be advising. Now, out of copyright, trademark, and patent risk, okay, patent is by far the most significant, by far. Okay, you could be shut down. The entire platform could be shut down, arguably under the right situations. Okay, trademark second much so, and I would assume copyright, but that's not a stead and fast rule. But one thing that is steadfast is that if you're a lawyer and you're advising your clients that there is no patent risk, as they use technology that's patented, you're giving bad advice and you could potentially get your client in a significant amount of trouble. Let's think of a hypothetical client. Let's say you have a client called Closed River, and Closed River sells and facilitates the sale of billions of dollars worth of NFTs over the last year or two. Okay, and Closed River gets a patent infringement notice. Okay, Closed River has very, very little expense, but a lot of revenue, which means they make a lot of profit. Roughly 25% of that profit should go to the patent holder, at least that profit derived from the patented invention. Their lawyers told them there was no patent risk. Suppose the patent holder says, we don't want to license the technology to you, so let's not worry about you paying profit. We just want you to shut down because we want to create our own NFT marketplace and we want exclusivity in it. And this is our technology. That company is out of business if it's litigated and the patent holder's rights are upheld. That means that patent is valid. Now, there's an if then, of course, because it's a legal issue, you have to go to court. But think about the amount of risk that comes into play. Billions of dollars of risk, okay? And lawyers are saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's I look at a lot of tokens all the time, and when I came upon this story over the last few months, I've kind of just each new token just added to the scale of what you were doing. And it
Mhm.
was just, at some points, it was a bit overwhelming because I'm like, man, especially reading the abstract, there's really nothing that's left out. There's nothing that's left out. I have actively been looking, not to dispute anything that you're claiming, but just to see how far reaching this goes. And even I mentioned IoT earlier, a big project in the IoT space is IOTA. They use a Tango form of DLT, but even when you read the white paper, how it's described is they use the same keywords, value transfer, removing the risk, the counterparty risk, clients, things like that. And when it comes to the NFTs, I always understood that yes, the art that was just to bring people's attention to it, right? But my question would be about the NFTs would be around tokenization because through tokenization is when they're really going to kick off NFT utility. So would tokenization also fall under that umbrella? The act of
Tokenization,
tokenization?
it could possibly fall depending on how you tokenize it, but
Okay.
it would definitely come into place once you move the token because
Right.
it's a transfer of value. So some processes of tokenization, you transfer value upon the tokenization. You may or may not. Let's suppose you don't. Okay. If you transfer that token to somebody else, then you've transferred value. And that's when the patent comes into play. And the issue with tokenization and NFTs is that they're both useless if you don't give it to somebody. What's the purpose of tokenizing a building if you just keep ownership of that building? So you tokenize a building because you want to pass ownership or transfer value or create a loan, collateralize something else. Um, Also, interestingly enough, is NFTs, in my opinion, the real killer app with NFTs is not the tokenization, but to create an expandable revenue stream over something that originally was never even liquid enough to transfer. To give you an example, I'll call it serialized NFTs. You can use the music industry. You have a lot of artists. I was just talking to one last week who were complaining, bitching that they only get 0.0001% of the streaming revenue. Okay, very low. In other words, less than 100th of a percent. But they had all the power in the beginning. They were the content creators. They owned 100% of the IP, but they didn't have access to the distribution infrastructure. Okay, and they didn't have marketing capability. So back in the days when I was a kid, not even as a kid, 20 years ago, actually, trying to make sure I have them 25 years ago, right? 25 years ago, the distribution infrastructure was the sole purview of the big record labels like Sony, Warner Music, etc. They own the um, methods of printing wax records. They own the ability to create CDs. They own the distributors that sent the CDs to retailers, etc. It was very expensive to replicate that. So they were in control. Here comes the internet, and you could send files over the internet, and everybody went berserk. They started suing individual retail users of the music. Very dangerous because you sue your clients, and you are not going to have a lot of clients or customers. And then the streaming model came, and that dropped and compressed margins, but made it inexpensive for everybody to consume large amounts of music. Okay. Now, what's common through all those methods is that the distribution infrastructure was no longer monolithic and very expensive, but it was free for everybody to access. So now that you could send or stream music through the internet, everybody could do it. That was the big wall that prevented the IP owners from making money and allowed the distribution owners to hoard the money. But people are not looking at that now because they think you still need these big monoliths. You don't. The only thing they offer now is one thing, and that is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think of your IP creation as a business, then you raise capital, you purchase marketing, and you created Sony Records or Warner Music in house, and you get to keep 100% of the profits. Okay. I'll give you an example of how this works. What's your favorite genre of music?
Oh, hip hop.
Okay.
Before I was on YouTube, I was a rapper. So as you started to
Okay.
explain things, yeah, definitely, I understand.
Okay. So I'm an old hip hop head. You know, I brought up with Rakim, KRS, etc. All the way
Legends.
back,
Yeah.
all the way back to the '70s. We had Kool Herc in the very beginning, right? So you're a hip hop artist, okay? You decide that you have this, you know, these this crazy song, beats, etc. A lot of people like it. So instead of going to a record label, and the record label, let's suppose you sell 1 million records, you raise about $3 million total revenue sales. I'm just throwing numbers off the top of my head.
Right.
Okay. Out of that $3 million, the record company is running at say 30%, 40% profit margin. Again, I'm just throwing some off the top of my head. So that would be $1.2 million.
Mhm.
You get out of that $1.2 million, you might get like $20,000. Okay. So this scenario, instead of giving the record company the money up front, you find an investor, and that investor will fork you over 200,000 or 300,000. Let's say 300,000. You put that 300,000 into social media advertising. 300,000 in social media advertising, tightly targeted to your specific audience through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Google searches. I don't know about Facebook, but I'm just picking these. But just those particular platforms will get you a lot of distribution. Okay, and you keep 100% of revenues after you pay back your investors. So the investors want 300,000 plus a kicker, twice the 300,000, etc. Even if they just took half of everything. Okay, instead of getting $20,000, right, off of a $3 million revenue stream, you're talking you get 1.7 million. Dramatic difference. Why? Because you are now the actual IP owner becomes the actual business, as it should have been in the beginning. where you have the business strip the IP from the owner and then give them pennies.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they literally strip it, and the distributing company owns the IP. So you're getting $20,000 and you lose all your assets. It's a horrible deal.
Yeah, yeah. If it's any inspiring artists listening, that's
Yeah,
why you need to own your own masters.
right.
That was the game right there.
And now, if you do this as a serialized NFT, right, I'm going to bring this to the next level. Okay. So each stream is an NFT and it's unique. So one stream is NFT one, the second stream is NFT two, three, four, five. You have a contract that is expandable, so you can add additional royalties. And so you are as a rapper, okay, you have Wade, you have Wade Rock, that's what we'll call you, right? So Wade Rock says, I'm gonna offer you anybody who wants it uh, a night out on the town. Okay, so instead of spending 10 cents for my stream, right? You spend $500 and we'll go out to dinner, cameras and all that at a restaurant X. Let's say five people take you on. That $2,500 is the equivalent of thousands of streams.
Mm.
Get that up front, right? And then you have a next level up where um, you write a song, and then I'll rhyme your song on a beat. I'll do it for $5,000. And then you next level up, you can do a concert, okay? And your concert is all the members of the stream, your current customers, gets a 20% discount on the concert. Okay, you go back to those same investors, right? And instead of having a concert the way it's normally done, you rent the venue out yourself using your investors' money. You pay your investors back, and you keep 100% of the receipts after your expenses, which is paying your investors back. Okay, now you're talking where you're getting fractions of a penny per screen, but you're getting all of it. Now you're talking about getting hundreds of dollars per stream or thousands. Now, if you're good and you have a viral following, that's strong. What you need, and this monetization method is not, you don't need hundreds of millions of downloads or followers. You only need a couple of thousand very, very loyal followers. And you'd make more money than someone who had 20 or 30 million downloads, such as Erica Ari, who I like a lot. I mean, not Erica Ari, India Ari,
India, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Someone who's, you know, very talented, but doesn't seem to have broken into the level that Beyonce did. But she has some strong, very loyal followers. You get to monetize them. You give them stuff that makes them even more dedicated to you, and you get higher margins every time you go and amp up. This could be done, and that's what NFTs are for, right? Not for JPEGs, but to create a contractual relationship between the buyer and the seller, and that contractual relationship could get increasingly more advanced. And
Mm-hmm.
then you could take the NFT and you could resell it. And every time an NFT is resold, Erica Irie or Wade Rock would get a portion of that sale. So they get a commission every time that particular token moves. Now you've increased your revenue stream, diversified it every more. Every IP creator should be a business person, an entrepreneur. Think that way, and the patented technology gives you the ability to do it.
That makes me think of a project called Audius, and their big mission is to bring Web3 to the music industry, empower artists, things like that. It's still a young platform. It's built it's built with Solana programming. I wouldn't say it's directly set on Solana, but it's built with Solana's interface and programming. Um, and then there is points where you do transfer value. So I guess they would fall under this umbrella too. But their focus is making sure that the artist gets monetized. So yeah, that
Well,
was very, very insightful.
so let me jump in and make two comments. So you said it's to bring Web3 to the masses. Web3 is basically marketing scam language, in my opinion. Okay. Um, more common word for Web3 is called the internet. And
True.
so every time you had advanced technology in the internet and you put a new moniker on it, we'd be at Web, 453 right now. Okay. So, and,
But
that's marketing.
seeing it every day, it kind of gets programmed. But
Yeah,
you're right.
right. I
Yeah.
understand that's marketing mindset. Now, as for the startup that you mentioned, I don't know the name of it. I'm not talking that startup. you know, if of course it entails value transfer to show you how powerful that the patented application or the patented invention is that it doesn't really matter what that entity does, right? If it's using Solana, it will infringe because Solana can't function without value transfer. The Solana validators, do they get paid?
Mm-hmm.
So there a transaction fee involved?
Yep.
There you go.
Mm.
Transfer of value, right? If you have a mining node, if you have a validator, and that mining node validator gets compensated somehow for work, that's a conditional transfer of value. So do they get paid consistently with every transaction? No, they get paid contingent upon work that they do.
Mm.
That means you have two parties, you have the transfer of value, and that transfer is conditional. That's going to fall under the patent. So if Solana infringes, and it does because of the conditional value transfer, just from paying validators, okay, then anybody who runs on top of Solana is using the infringing network. And so they infringe as well. The same thing goes for Ethereum. Now, Ethereum is prolific. So Ethereum has proof of work and proof of mining, and you pay for each node, validator node or mining node uses a value transfer. And then 80% of all tokens, right, are probably USC based, 27, 21, etc.
Mm.
So if Ethereum infringes, everybody who runs on top of Ethereum infringes. And there's a strong chance that a lot of those entities that run on top of Ethereum infringe individually themselves or uniquely, but they also infringe by running on top of Ethereum. Go off to Bitcoin, the same thing. Okay, Bitcoin's Lightning Network infringes their swaps, conditional transfer of value. Bitcoin itself has partially signed Bitcoin transfers,
Yeah.
okay, or signatures, partially signed Bitcoin signatures. That's an infringement. So the patent, a lot of people say you have a very, very broad patent. Does it count? The patent is not broad at all. If you read it, it is hyper specific,
Super
right?
detailed.
Hyper specific. But the way this works, normally, the older a patent gets, the less valuable it is because technology tends to grow upward and away from the patent. We patented something that was very forward reaching. And
Mm.
so as the industry grows, they're growing on top of the patent. So it's not like the patent is broad, everybody's piling up on this little spot. Think of the patent being a door, um, and you have a big house on one side and a big yard on the other side. We didn't patent the entire neighborhood, but we patented the door, and everybody's going through the door to get into the neighborhood. So that's a simplistic way of overgeneralizing something and making it wrong by definition, right? But give it
Gotcha.
a try.
Yeah, that actually leads perfect into my next question because I do want to get to the Bitcoin versus the Bitcoin core, I believe, the
Mhm.
whole situation with Craig Wright and Coinbase. But I did want to ask, what about the Ethereum and virtual machine? Just
Okay.
like just that function itself, because from my understanding, the Ethereum virtual machine is it kind of sits in between Ethereum and other chains so that other chains can do what Ethereum can do. So
Uh-huh.
would the EVM fall under that umbrella as well?
The EVM does, but not for that reason. The EVM is create Ethereum is marketed as a world computer,
Mm.
okay, a device or a system, which it is. Okay, and the way that world computer works with a virtual machine, it is a device that sends value to another device or set of devices contingent upon a data source. Okay,
Yeah.
so the same thing. Now, it could get a little technical, but a lot of people say, well, how can that happen? And I came up with this idea in 2013, and it was patented in 2014. Ethereum didn't launch till 2015. Okay, so keep the chronology in line. Now, Ethereum had white papers and ideas were out, and I'm not going to get into who's smarter, who came first. That's absolutely irrelevant. I'm just allowing everybody to understand that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it takes precedent over everything else. Most ideas especially pertinent ideas, are not known. Think of the MMA. The best MMA fighter, nobody's probably never, ever heard of. The richest person in the world is likely unknown. And
Hmm.
for a good reason, because if he was outed, if he was doxxed, then everybody's going to harass him and try and take, his or her, I'm saying his, very well be a woman, her money. Okay. So just because you haven't heard of something or don't know about it does not mean it's wrong or doesn't exist. That mentality is a recipe for failure. So I tell everybody who's in the investment game or the operational game for businesses, always keep that in mind.
Right. Yeah, I am taking the little notes myself on some of the things you say. So let's get into Bitcoin a little bit. And I was specifically interested in Wright's claim against Coinbase that states that exchanges like Coinbase and others have been trading and encouraging investment into BTC, which is a software implementation created in 2017, different from the original code. Now, I remember hearing about this incident when I started to research the Lightning Network, and that took me to companies like Blockstream and just further down that rabbit hole. But I was curious to know if did the implementation of that BTC software did that bring Bitcoin under the patent?
Um, Bitcoin improvements are what brought Bitcoin under the patent. So they're called BIPs, so Bitcoin improvement proposals. So there are a couple that were made, and there could be several more. I just don't have the time to go through every single, improvement proposal. But basically, this is how the patent captures almost all the platforms. You start off with a platform using open source code, presumably a very smart, knowledgeable, experienced developers, talented, and they create a platform and does a lot of fancy things and does it well. But you start off small and plain vanilla to get it to work, and then you bolt on attachments. It's like building a building. So you put bricks on, etc. In order to make the best, most competitive platform you can, you want to put in the best ideas that you can. Now, unless your development team is the smartest people in the world, the most knowledgeable people in the world, and have access to all the information in the world, and able to produce stuff faster than everybody else in the world, and able to go back in history, right, and do stuff before it was invented, so they can invent it first. There's a 100% chance that they're going to include somebody else's invention in. Now, there's a strong open source movement, but not everybody does things open source. And the reason is it is impossible to make money selling something that a competitor could give away for free. It is impossible. Okay, which is why you do certain things closed source or you patent things. Now, patenting and open source are not diametrically opposed. They actually don't have a whole lot to do with each other. I can patent something and then open source it.
Mm-hmm.
It's my sense. The fact that I patent it means I own it and control it. So by definition, I can open source it. Or I can have something that's open source and I can include somebody's patented invention. It's still open source, but you're using somebody's stuff without their permission. So that open source that has a patented invention is infringing, and then everybody who uses that open source product that has a patented invention is infringing. And that's what happens if you use somebody else's property. I decide to build a house. I like the chandelier. I'll go take the chandeliers out of your house, put it in my house. Now my house looks good. I have nice chandeliers. But if Ray comes over and says, I want my chandeliers back or pay me for my chandeliers, you don't really have credible legal recourse because you're the one that took the chandeliers.
Right.
So that's a real world example. And that second example is how the Bitcoin protocol infringes because they use patented inventions to increase the functionality of Bitcoin. Bitcoin came before the patent, but the fancy peer-to-peer transactions, the patent came first and it was patented and Bitcoin included it. And for good reason. Now, in the crypto sphere, you have the cypherpunk mentality, and then you have a lot of people who just listen to them without bothering to think critically, independently, and they say patent is bad. Patent, is bad for productivity. That's absolute nonsense. And all you need to do is look at the world. Okay, the number one patent office in the world is the U.S. Okay, The number two is Japan. Number three is either China or the EU and the UK. EU and UK are combined currently. Okay. Now, who has the deepest and the widest technological markets in the world?
The United States, I'm assuming.
United States. Who has the deepest and widest economic and financial markets in the world?
That would come from Europe.
No, that's the United States as well.
Okay.
Okay. So the country with the most stringent patent and the biggest patent office also has the deepest and widest technology markets and the biggest financial investment markets. Number two, right, will be economically China. And China currently issues more blockchain patents than any other country, including the US, for those who don't know. China takes their IP very seriously now because they're a big producer of IP. So they no longer take it.
Since we brought up China, can I want to interject because I
Okay.
did have pulled up the blockchain services network over in China.
Right.
Actually, did a report about the Belt and Road situation and how they look to incorporate blockchains. Some of the blockchains in that network would definitely fall under the patent because you have tokens like Algorand, for example.
Right.
And Algorand is a lot similar to XRP, Stellar Lumens, things of that nature. So I guess my question from that would be, have you bumped into any friction coming from China or any other places around the globe?
Well, for right now, things are still under development in China. So I don't comment on it, and we're not discussing it because China is still in flux. Um,
Gotcha.
Maybe next year, later on this year, but for
Okay.
right now, we don't comment on it. But I will comment that it appears that China has pushed all private crypto out of the country. And in order to get back in, you have to go through their curated system, which is a BSN,
Yeah.
which is I don't think is functional now, but maybe I know it's functional on a testnet basis, but I don't know if it's functional on an actual basis. The only thing that they allow running that I'm aware of, and I don't know at all, of course, is a EUR, their centralized
Yeah.
CBDC.
It's all still very closed off at this point. So yeah.
Yeah,
You're right about that. So let's get back to IP a little bit. This whole research, getting into this, it has me curious about, are there, because I'm aware of True Return Systems, Craig, and of course your patent, and then I know that Gilbert Verdian with the Quant Network, he has a patent filed under his name for under it's TC307. I can't remember the specifics of it, but he's on record as having a patent. And then David Schwartz with XRP, and feel free to comment on the whole XRP situation, but he has a patent too for DLT. And that just has me curious about, are there any other patents in the space that we may need to know about?
there are a lot of patents. I mean, the N-Chain, which Craig Wright is the chief science officer, they have 53 patents last time I checked. Um, a lot of those patents, in my opinion, are minutiae and dust, you know, things that are not foundational. But three of them look like they have meat. And while they may not be foundational, they do seem to have significance. It looks like he may have a patent on the creation of NFTs. And it looks like he may have a patent on the functioning of Bitcoin. But it takes a lot of time, resources, and intellectual firepower to accurately go through the patents. And I don't have an incentive to do it. I don't really care much about his business, and unless it intersects with mine, and it may in the future, but for right now. But if I'm not mistaken, I did include them in the Coinbase report,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so anybody who's interested, take a look at it. I did a cursory analysis, but I'm not going to go deep because of the resources it takes. To really understand a patent, you have to read it. You have to read it with a objective mind. That knocks 80% of people who will read it out of the box.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand it completely, and then you have to apply, the concepts of patent law, the actual technology involved, et cetera. So, it takes a decent amount of work. And that's with an average patent. I think our patent is difficult. Um, so it takes even more work. And to add on, most of the patents in this space are owned by the old boys network, I'd say. So um, Bank of America, Wells Fargo has a lot. Chain is one of the newcomers on the block, and not well accepted, but they have over 1,500 patent applications filed, despite the fact they only have 53 existing. You have Allstate, NASDAQ, Coinbase has a couple, Gemini, the Winklevoss twins, Gemini, I don't know, I think it's Gemini Capital or Intellectual Properties. Um, you have a pretty wide cross section, even consensus in JP Morgan. So there are a lot of patents involved. It's been my experience that when you're in the banking industry and you patent, they tend to make very narrow patents based on a particular sliver of the banking industry that they cover. When their invention or their discovery is much more wide ranging, they decide to make it super narrow on, you know, that tick of data.
Yeah.
Those coming from the outside in who see a solution, patent a solution, and it solves many problems versus one tiny little sliver. And that's the issue when I see things coming out of, in general, corporations. And on the technology side, very similar. The tech heads. I benefited from being ignorant and not as smart as everybody else. And so my patent covered a problem that wasn't specific to any particular blockchain. And that problem was the transfer of value without an authoritative third party contingent upon a data source, which is a fancy way of saying replicating traditional finance abilities on a distributed ledger. And so that's why it's able to cover, distributed ledgers, blockchains, centralized platforms, decentralized platforms, etc.
Yeah, it's the point of value transfer.
Right.
That's
And
the big piece for that.
I am most definitely not a member of the Old Boys Network at all. I am not welcome or accepted. So
Yeah. Wow, that's really mind blowing. So it makes me want to ask about Africa, and it was more so focused on the relationship with the M-Pesa and Bitcoin. And
mhm.
then I was also going to ask, what about the mobile money movement in Africa? Because a lot of currencies, I know that they oftentimes use phone minutes or airtime in replace for currencies. So would that in any way be affected, the whole mobile money movement in Africa or the M-Pesa interacting with Bitcoin?
Well, currently we only have patents in the U.S. jurisdiction and in Japan.
Okay.
Those are very strong because Japan is the third largest economy, probably the second largest banking jurisdiction. The U.S. is number one around, all the way, and the U.S. has the largest concentration of nodes for most DOTs. That's not going to affect M-Pesa in Africa much. It may affect it on the Bitcoin side. It's to be investigated. Don't really have time to do that now. It's not high on my priority list.
Gotcha.
Um, I do want to go to Africa. Africa, at the time that we were filing the patent applications, sub-Saharan Africa and many other portions didn't have um, a mature enough um, IP protection system under the patent laws for my resources.
Hmm.
And so I decided to, bypass that. That may not be the case in the near future. And if it is, we'll move forward. We'll invent something and then we'll patent, we'll attempt to patent it. But for right now, it doesn't. Bitcoin is just slightly different, but that's a much longer and more convoluted discussion. So I have to pass on that to next time.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Understandable. You know, my questioning was kind of centered around giving the global implications of it because I have come to understand just by reading through the patents and everything that's involved that this is going to have an earthquake effect to it. It's going to be a very earth shattering effect because of the patent affecting each individual action that most people do when they get involved with crypto. So I was just curious as about it, how it affected different sectors of the market and things like that. But as I learned, the point of value transfer, wherever there's a transfer of value, that's what would fall under the patent. So
Now, that's a slight simplification, oversimplification, but let's say the transfer of value contingent upon a data source.
okay.
Okay, so if I sent Bitcoin to you, it's not, it just does not cover. If I sent Bitcoin to you, but the sending that Bitcoin was contingent upon whether it's before or after 12 o'clock, or the price of corn, or the price of Ethereum, or, whether the light is green on the corner of your house, then that falls under the actual patent. Now, as for Africa itself, the concept of a peer-to-peer capital market is very, very monumental. I'm going to step outside of the actual patent. We'll go through a quick global macro. Listen, Africa is by far the richest continent in the world, without a close second. Africa is also the poorest continent in the world. There's a problem that this dichotomy shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
The reason it does is because Africa does not have access to global markets, not directly. So I'll give three nations, or three examples. Ghana is one of the top producers of oil in the world. Okay. It is the top producer of gold on the African continent, and the African continent is either the or one of the top producers of gold in the world. Okay. Nigeria is even a more prolific producer of oil. Okay. Globally and in Africa, and a producer of many other things, bauxite, etc. These things can be sold off at par to the global markets. You have basically a melanin tax. So Nigerian oil is sold at a discount, shipped offshore. It's processed, turned into a refined product such as gas, and then it's imported back into Africa and sold to Africans at a premium. So Africans are paying a premium for something that they produce below cost. Why is that? Because they do not have a large processing plant onshore, number one. And number two, when they sell to the markets, they're forced to take a discount because they can't sell as a market participant at the same level as Saudi Arabia or the US. There's no reason for that. Nigerian oil, to my knowledge, is not inferior to Saudi Arabian oil.
Right.
Saudi Arabian oil is basically what North African oil anyway, right? Or close to it. I take a look at a map. But this is a geopolitical issue, and it's a global economic issue. Using peer-to-peer capital markets, you can allow the Nigerians to sell the oil directly to somebody, and they could get a much more competitive price. If they have a refinement and processing system onshore, they could sell finished product to themselves and around the world. Aliko Dangote, one of the billionaires out of Nigeria, and there's quite a few of them, by the way. Nigeria is a very wealthy country. Most people don't realize that. He's building a vertically integrated energy source system where he does exploration of oil, he does extraction, drilling and pumping, he does storage, he does refinement and distribution, all in one stack, which will make Nigeria theoretically a powerhouse. Now, you still need access to global markets. That can be done very quickly from a technological perspective. From a geopolitical perspective, it's a different story. Africa needs to get the respect that they, to do that. That's beyond my ken, but it's easily done. Same thing with Ghana and gold and oil. Same thing with sovereign financing. Ghana has better credit risk as a sovereign entity than many Eastern European and Central European nations, Ukraine, etc., significantly better. They have paid historically a 330 basis point premium with a better credit rating. Why is that?
Yeah, I would need to do
Well,
more research.
we'll call it the melanin tax. I'm saying it.
Ah,
Okay,
gotcha.
I'm saying it. And
Yeah,
if it's wrong, simply show me how. I'm welcome for anybody to just do the math.
true.
So
You know,
if they're able to borrow directly from the global markets directly,
yeah,
then greed comes into play, and they say, "Listen, I'll give you a better deal," and that's easy to do. Again, peer-to-peer capital markets. They could borrow money directly from family offices in Europe, in the States, or Asia, or South America. Family office have a long-term perspective in investment. They have a lot of capital, hedge funds, private equity funds, you name it.
right. Yeah, in my research for this Africa report, one fact that stood out to me the most was that the majority of people there aren't documented, meaning they don't have identification. And that has caused problems with claiming land that's being passed down from one generation to the next. It was a particular story about a daughter and a father who the father passed away uh, sometime during the process of his land being verified to him. And when the daughter went to go make use of the land or sell it, she couldn't because she couldn't verify her identity in relation to him. They took the land from her.
Right,
That is echoed all throughout the continent, and that would that's another thing that I'm seeing is that in Africa they are very ambitious about blockchain, very ambitious about blockchain for those very reasons. So that's another reason why I'm putting that report together too, because I want people to kind of get a picture of that because it's not being spoken about. But
okay.
and let's end on some a little bit of crypto discussion. I call it the propping up of USDC Circle. I was very impressed about the Circle report, and I know my personal views on USDC. I think they have been chosen, by the big players. And when I read your report, I was like, well, that explains it. They've been basically being kept afloat for the last year or so by BlackRock, BNY Mellon, other players like that. So, have you guys done any research as regards to USDC or other stable coins? Or, well, yeah, they're technically executing conditional uh, value transfers. But do you guys have anything on paper regarding that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most stablecoin, anything that's tokenized, there's a very strong chance it infringes on the patent. But let's
Right.
suppose it doesn't infringe on the patent, unless it has its own blockchain. What blockchain would most of these tokens run on?
Ethereum.
There you go. Who infringes? Ethereum.
Right.
Okay.
It
And
all really
when I
sounds
say,
very abstract. Yeah.
yeah, now when I say XYZ infringes, infringement is something that is decided by a court of law, all right, which hasn't happened. What I'm giving you is my personal, uneducated, unprofessional opinion. I'm just a dad. I'm not as smart as those other guys. Okay. I'm just a dad. What this dad's opinion is, it infringes.
I am under the awareness, and then I want everyone else that's watching this too. And we'll end with this part. This is a long term plan here. It's going to take some time, but what I do believe is going to come from it is going to be it's really going to get us to what we all envision crypto bringing to society. And that's free financial access to everyone, full financial inclusion, and the ability to do business with someone in a third world, well, we won't use third world country, but in smaller, lesser known nations while you're sitting at home from your couch. Like, I believe that what you're doing is going to be crucial to us eventually getting to that step. So,
Okay.
yeah. I did want to ask, what links can I put down under this video to just give people more information? I didn't want to share anything that wasn't ready to be shared.
Well, Twitter at Reggie Middleton, um, boombustblog.com. That's where the meet will be posted. Uh, And if anybody's interested, LinkedIn, I don't use it, but I use Hootsuite to blast off, to LinkedIn, etc.
Okay.
But I'm most active on Twitter, and Boom Plus Blog is where the reports are being posted.
Okay. Awesome.
So that was definitely the most insightful conversation I've had all year. Now, if you found value in this content, please hit that like button, leave a comment, and most importantly, share this video so that way more people find out this information and acquire this knowledge. Also, in the description section, guys, will be links to everything you need to know, the Boom Bust blog, Reggie's Twitter account, as well as links to the patents that you can analyze for yourself to get a deeper understanding of what's going on here. I firmly believe that his mission is going to usher in the next stage of this cryptocurrency market, the stage that we're really trying to get to, guys, because the importance of IP, the importance of branding, especially when it comes to the expansion of businesses, and that's what these are, technologies that centered around, that are supported by different businesses. But the key to the advancement of that is going to boil down to the individual intellectual properties that are responsible for the creation of these assets. So with all that being said, you know what I'm going to tell you. Have a great day. Have a prosperous day. And most importantly, if the money is digital, so is the hustle. I'll see y'all in the next video.